And before we actually start, I think it is very important that I introduce the logistics to this meeting. First, let me talk about the translation. There is a button, if you want translation, where you can actually click on it and then go on translation. There is Portuguese as well as French and English. And then please kindly remember to mute the previous language that you have selected once you have actually changed to the language that you prefer. So the option button is on more. You will see under more, there is interpretation. So you just click there and choose the language, either English, French, or Portuguese. And then once you are done selecting the language, go back and mute the original audio that you have used before you select the interpretation. And today's program, we have this meeting will start from now until around 11:30. We will start with the speech that is recorded from our guest of honor, who will present for us a message of support. And then we will then go to the lead consultant, who will take us through the envisage process as well as contents of the SADC model law on prison and oversight. And then we'll take it from them. Without further ado, let me start by introducing our guest of honor. The first guest of honor for this meeting is the Honorable Speaker, Nelly Muti, the Speaker of Zambia. As I've indicated, the speech will be recorded and our colleague Ronald will play the speech. And then thereafter we'll have the lead consultant, Anneke Meerkotter, who will continue taking us through the model law, as I've said. Now, in the introduction of the speaker, let me talk a brief about the Honorable Nelly KB Muti, who is the Speaker of the National Assembly of Zambia, serving as the first woman to hold this prestigious position since her election in September 2021. The Honorable Nelly Muti is a distinguished lawyer by profession. She holds a Bachelor's of Law degree from the University of Zambia and is recognized as an accomplished arbitrator and mediator. Prior to her election as a speaker, the Honorable Muti served as the chairperson of the Anti-Corruption Commission of Zambia between 2002 and 2006, and was a commissioner of the Constitution Review Commission between 2003 and 2005. The roles that underscore her commitment to governance and legal reform. She also held position of Vice President of the Law Association of Zambia and has a reputation as a human rights advocate and a civil rights advocate and activist. As a speaker, the Honorable Muti is known for her dedication to upholding parliamentary rules, promoting gender equality, and advancing the participation of women in politics, as well as in governance. She was elected the Vice President of the Inter-Parliamentary Union in 2025, further highlighting her influence beyond Zambia. Her leadership continued to pioneer initiatives supporting sustainable development and climate action and inclusively within Zambia democratic frameworks as well as internationally. Ladies and gentlemen, let me allow our colleague Ronald to play the video of message of support from the Honorable Nelly. Thank you very much.
Honorable members of Parliament, distinguished colleagues, representatives of correctional services institutions, representatives of designated oversight bodies, members of the national human rights institutions, staff of Parliament, ladies and gentlemen. It is my great honor to address this gathering as we delve into this urgent task of shaping stronger oversight mechanisms for our region's correctional facilities, with particular attention to the experiences of women in prisons and the imperative need to eliminate sexual violence and torture behind bars. The model law on prison oversight, spearheaded by the SADC Parliamentary Forum, represents a bold and necessary commitment to ensure that no person is deprived of dignity, safety, or justice due to incarceration. Oversight is not solely a bureaucratic requirement. It is the foundation of transparency, accountability, and reform within the correctional institutions. Let me share with you a brief background on Zambia's prison statistics. As of May 2024, Zambia's total prison population stands at 28,225, housed in 90 institutions with an official capacity of only 10,650 inmates. This means that our prisons are operating at a staggering 226.5% occupancy rate, and the pressure on facilities, staff, and services is immense. Approximately 20.1% of inmates are pre-trial detainees, highlighting the slow pace of justice and the vulnerability of those awaiting trial. Women comprise 3.3% of Zambia's prison population, numbering approximately 876 in 2023, up from 237 in 2005. The female prison population rate has more than doubled in the past 2 decades, now standing at 4.4 per 100,000 of national population. These numbers remind us that prisons are not just spaces to detain. They are lived environments for thousands, including women, whose specific health and safety needs must be acknowledged and protected. Too often, women prisoners in Zambia report facing elevated risks from overcrowding and lack of privacy to inadequate health care and heightened exposure to sexual violence and degrading treatment. Despite legal provisions and some disciplinary actions, enduring challenges persist, as cases of sexual violence and torture rarely result in prosecution or sufficient redress for victims. The SADC model law aims to institutionalize oversight that is both strong and gender responsive. This means, 1, enabling regular independent inspections of all correctional facilities with the specific training for inspectors to identify sexual and gender-based violence. 2, protecting complaints mechanism from retaliation and ensuring that women prisoners are safe to report abuse without fear. 3rd, providing accessible healthcare and mental health services is key to rehabilitation and the restoration of dignity. 4th, mandating data collection and reporting so oversight is evidence-driven and responsive to the challenging realities within the Zambia's prisons. Colleagues, oversight is not about surveillance. It is about care, justice, and preparedness to challenge systems that perpetuate harm. By adopting the model law, Zambia and the wider SADC region can set a precedent that no one, regardless of their status, is forgotten or denied justice. As we leave this session, let us collectively champion oversight structures that not only protect but also empower them so that every Zambian woman, man, and child behind bars to retain hope for a second chance. I thank you.
Thank you very much from the Honorable Nelly Muti for recording her message of support. And I wanted to actually quote some of the few words that she said in her speech. She said that oversight is not solely a bureaucratic requirement. It is a foundation of transparency, accountability, reform within correctional institution. She further said the model law on prison and oversight represent a bold and necessary commitment to ensure that no person is deprived of dignity or justice due to incarceration. Furthermore, she actually went and said prisons are not just spaces to detain, they are lived environments for thousands, including women, whose specific health and safety needs must be acknowledged and protected. And that oversight is not only about surveillance, it is about care, justice, and preparedness to challenge the system that perpetuates harm. And then lastly, in her closing, he said, by adopting the model law, Zambia and wider SADC region can set a precedent that no one, regardless of their status, is forgotten or denied justice. I think these are very, very strong words that charts the path towards the model law. And then this is very, very important, especially if we want to ensure that no one is left behind, no one is denied justice, and no one's their rights are violated, irrespective of their circumstances or irrespective of whether they are detained or not. And then it's in these ways that I find comfort that the model law will definitely chart a new direction in terms of ensuring that the rights of those who are vulnerable are protected from now going forward. In so doing, I will now introduce the second speaker, who is actually the lead consultant to take us through the model law, as well as to respond to some of the things that the Honorable Nelly Moody have said, to check whether the model law, what it will cover, as well as the processes that will follow after this particular session. And then thereafter, we can then take a question and answer session where we will open the question for those who are on the floor to start asking the question. Over to you, Madam Anneke Meerkotter. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Zechale, and it's great to be here and to have everyone on the call. I want to also just note the judges who are on the call, who are members of the technical working group, Judge Ntaba, Judge Papadakis, and Judge Yangailo. And I think you might want to add from the discussions that we've had on the model law, if there's anything I leave out. I'm glad the Speaker of Zambia spoke, because some of the best judgments on prisons and the need to respect prisoner rights are actually from Zambia, including a brilliant judgment by the Chief Justice of Zambia on adequate nutrition for prisoners. And those judgments have been incorporated and acknowledged within the model law itself. So just to give a sense of what the model law would hope to contain, the key thing is that it will set out certain principles to ensure that all countries are on the same page in terms of what we want to achieve around prison oversight. And as the Speaker of Zambia mentioned, the issue of empowerment of prisoners is obviously key to the model law itself, and ensuring that the rights and dignity of prisoners are upheld. The model law also looks at accountability and transparency of both prison institutions and oversight bodies. And it's important for oversight bodies to be able to show what it is that they're doing and to report openly about their findings on correctional centers. The model law also tries to deal with some of the issues around overcrowding. Now, just to note that the model law focuses on how do we improve prison oversight. It does not focus on minimum standards for prisons because that is already contained in existing regional and domestic and international laws for the region. But when we do speak about prison oversight, obviously when people conduct oversight, they will be confronted with situations where there is overcrowding. And Zambia is one of the countries in our region which has some of the more acute forms of overcrowding. And what the idea would be is that there's interactions between the criminal justice system and correctional services so that some of the issues around overcrowding can be addressed, including issues around early release, around parole, around pardons, and specifically around how to reduce pretrial detention. So just to note that there are, in most of our countries, more than one, sometimes more than a few ways in which oversight is conducted of prisons. Now, the idea is not to have one oversight body, but to actually have a number of different oversight bodies that work in coordination with each other and that complement each other. So within the model law itself, there is a section on complaints management. Now, again, it's not for the oversight bodies necessarily to deal exclusively with complaints, although they ought to also address complaints, but there ought to, within every facility, be an internal complaints mechanism. And then at the same time, prisoners ought to then also be able to simultaneously, if they want to, consult external complaints mechanisms. The key thing for oversight is that when an oversight body comes to a place of detention, they need to see whether or not there's a complaints mechanism in place and whether that is written down, what type of complaints are being received, and how those complaints are responded to and how quickly they are responded to. So the model law goes into some detail about just the need for complaints mechanisms to be unbiased and fair and equal in how they treat people. And obviously, it's important to take cognizance of the fact that not all prisoners are able to access complaints mechanisms in the same way. And any complaints mechanism need to be aware that it should be accessible to all prisoners, whatever their language or any sort of other constraints that they might have in lodging complaints. And then there's an important issue around how do these complaints get addressed, and also that there shouldn't be any reprisals against people who have complained. So in terms of the external oversight mechanisms that there are, in all of our laws, there is what is called official visitors, and these are people who the law allows to visit a place of detention and inspect it. And normally they would make recommendations in the visitor book of the facility that then gets it gets taken note of by the head of the facility and reported to the minister. So the model law deals a bit with the official visitors, and official visitors would include different line ministries and members of parliament as well. And then in all our countries, there's a practice of judges and magistrates visiting prisons, and the model law goes into what some of the duties ought to be. So this is a long-standing practice to conduct oversight by the judiciary of prisons, but it's not actually properly documented in our laws. So the model law actually tries to do a bit of that by looking at what visiting justices ought to take note of, and specifically what they need to check around, not just whether complaints mechanisms are operational, but whether there is a proper early release process, whether foreign nationals are detained under immigration laws, if that the legality of those sort of detentions, whether there are proper investigations, if there are deaths, and that the deaths are properly reported, and obviously looking at specific needs of, for example, children, incarcerated women with children, and other vulnerable groups. Another oversight mechanism that exists in all SADC countries is national human rights institutions. These are either human rights commissions or ombuds, and they have the legal mandate to visit places of detention. They don't all have the same powers, and so the model law suggests that parliaments amend their national human rights institution laws to provide them with additional powers to be able to follow up after recommendations, and for their recommendations to actually be binding on correctional services. It also emphasizes independence of these facilities. Another oversight mechanism would be independent prison visiting committees, which is sort of a lay visitor scheme in some places, and which is really the ability of people within the vicinity of the prison to be able to more frequently conduct oversight. And here we're specifically encouraging multidisciplinary committees where different people can look at different needs of prisoners. And the key emphasis is on ensuring that the reports are properly channeled so that it can make an impact, and that they are trained to know what to look for. And then finally, increasingly, we're having designated independent correctional oversight bodies, and the model law just speaks a bit about them. And these are very important as a best practice that one would hope all countries eventually adopt. There are many other ways in which oversight can happen. So, for example, health professionals who access places of detention also have some monitoring and reporting obligations, and ought to be trained on what to do when they come across certain violations. And then there's a range of vulnerable groups that might need specific support and that might need specific attention and specialist attention by oversight bodies. And the model law deals a little bit with that, but the overall principle is one of all acts that that any oversight should look universally at whether or not discrimination occurs and how it occurs within any facility, and whether measures are taken to support groups that are at risk within any particular facility. And then there's specific recommendations around training and mandatory reporting of oversight bodies, and also ensuring that correctional center staff are trained to capture data which can be used by oversight bodies themselves. And so some of the data that has been identified, and this is quite detailed within the proposed model law, would be a range of data that can be recorded by correctional centers on a regular basis, so that they can be fed through to oversight bodies, including parliaments, so to enable them to actually conduct proper oversight, to have a better sense of budget constraints and other sort of areas that needs improvement within the prison facility. And this would then inform policy development and priorities allocated by Parliament and by ministries. And there's quite a bit, for example, about the need to disaggregate data, because if one just look, for example, at statistics which speaks in general, it doesn't always reflect increased problems at specific facilities. So it might be that if one looked at occupancy level at a national level, it might be fairly low, but there might be some facilities which are highly overcrowded and others which are less overcrowded. And the lack of disaggregation then makes it more difficult to remedy clear problems that there are. And what is extremely important in our region is the need for service failures to be documented. We know for a fact that there are prisons without TB medication, that these prisons who on a frequent basis where prisoners go without food for 3 or more days, or without water for 3 or more days. Now, these are significant shortcomings which are seldom reported and seldom then budgeted for because they're so they easily escape detention. So we need to just work on that quite a bit, on what gets reported and how the data gets sent through to people who can make a difference. And then finally, the model law speaks a bit about what parliaments themselves can do to increase oversight. Yesterday, we heard from the Defense Committee of the Zimbabwe Parliament that they do actually visit places of detention on a regular basis. And there might be other important ways in which parliaments do oversight that we can include here that can be examples of best practices. So I will stop here and welcome any questions or discussion. You're muted, Jacob.
Apologies for that. I was saying thank you very much for taking us through the model law. And I'm very happy that you highlighted that the model law encourage regional harmonization, in particular around prisons, legal framework within the region. But you also highlighted 5 important things for me, or takeaways, which include mandatory reporting, in particular around capturing of data as well, investigating crimes within prisons, as well as complaints mechanisms that are not biased, and then also remedial actions for issues that have, or investigations that have been investigated. At the end, there must be remedial action. Thank you very much for highlighting this. I have seen that we have 3 judges. From Mozambique, we have Judge Papadaki, and then Zambia, we have Judge Ndaba, as well as Malawi. We have another judge from Malawi. Welcome to this consultative process. Please, I will now open for questions, those that are directed to Anneke, and then also suggestion in terms of probably things that we require them to be included in the model law, but also the judges, if you wanted to say something, you are more than welcome to also chip in terms of your experiences as you deal with the law in a regular basis, so that the model law is rich and has comprehensive best practices as well as knowledge from different people across the SADC region. I will now open for question and answers. Anyone who wants to try? Thanks for correcting. For Zambia, we have Judge Pixie Aguilo. Please welcome as well. And then if there are any questions, who wants to come through? From the judges, anyone who wants to contribute to the model law, or want to raise some issues? Or wanted to support the model law or anything?
Good morning. This is Zonentaba from Malawi. I just wanted to highlight, I think the fundamental issue that I think is being raised by the model law is that when you look at the criminal justice system, the players are multiple, but there is need for especially those with transparency and accountability roles to actually do play their part. Those within the prison system itself, those within constitutional setup bodies, as well as the judiciary. So I think the most fundamental aspect of the model law is that the accountability and transparency is upheld within the prison system, because ultimately the only right that prisoners don't have within that system is the right of movement. But the issue is that model law should ensure that all other rights and freedoms are protected and upheld. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Judge Ntaba. Anyone who wants to come in?
May I please come in? Sorry, I can't find my hand raising function.
Okay, thank you very much. Please come in.
Thank you. My name is Chipom Shotankata. I'm with the University of Zambia School of Law. So from my observation, a lot of the provisions, for example, in the Zambian context, that allow different government institutions to provide oversight in prisons, the provisions are usually empowering, but the observation is that this is not done on a regular basis. So I'm not quite sure to what extent the oversight model law can compel institutions such as the judiciary, whoever else is recognized to carry out these on a regular basis. It's one thing to have the standard that says you can go into the prison and this is what you should look out for. And it's another to actually go into the prison. So what happens and how do we hold the different duty bearers to account? Will the model law be able to address that? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can I have the last hand before I give to Anneke to respond? If you can't find the button, please go ahead. Okay, while people are gathering their thoughts, I will give to Anneke for her to respond to the question that was raised by Chipo Nkata from Zambia School of Law at the University of Zambia. Thank you.
Thanks, Jacob. I'm actually wondering if one of the judges can answer that question, because the question was specifically about how do you compel judges to conduct regular visits and actually report on that. I know, for example, in some countries, that is part of the questions judges would be asked if they want to be promoted about whether they conducted oversight. In some countries, it is part of performance management. But for the most part, how do one ensure that a judge does what they're supposed to do, taking into account also that judges are overworked and normally have quite a large docket in front of them. So, because you don't want a situation where a law starts dictating to the judiciary what to do, but you do want the judiciary to exercise the oversight in a meaningful and in a regular way. And this is, and I think it's worth just brainstorming about this. How do one do it? Yeah, so that it actually gets done. If one can do it that way, because sometimes it's about political will and whether the Chief Justice or the Judge President believes enough in prison oversight to monitor whether or not judges conduct their oversight duties. There are some instances. So, for example, in the one judgment I mentioned about Zambia, the Chief Justice actually suggested that the prisons report to the court at the opening session of every term on whether or not on the amount of people who are in detention and in pretrial detention and those sort of figures to give the court an idea of how they should conduct their work and fast track some of their procedures and those sort of things. So I find that to be an extremely critical point. I note what Judge Ntabbat mentioned about multiple players. The topic for this particular webinar is around correctional services themselves, and how do one improve oversight within the correctional services system so that and I think that does exist in many countries. I just don't think it's necessarily always well recorded and the not always fed back to Parliament in terms of the findings of that oversight role. But it would be useful to think the extent to which one can add sort of internal procedures of correctional services departments into the model law to actually strengthen some of the oversight. So, for example, some countries have inspectors whose sole job it is to go to prison facilities and see that they are compliant with all the domestic laws and those sort of things. And it might be useful to ensure provisions that those inspectors are independent and that they have some reporting functions back to the minister or some sort of, or something like that, perhaps. There ought to also, in theory, be some sort of accountability for correctional service, for the heads of facilities who repeatedly ignore recommendations. And there's been a lot of debate about whether a model law ought to go into the minutiae of these sort of things, or whether it should really only deal with the broad overarching principles around oversight. So I'm raising a lot of questions specifically because I want people to debate and give answers, because that's where we are a little bit stuck. So it's very good to take time out on a Friday to ponder these questions, I think. Yeah, I'll hand back to you, Jacob.
Thank you very much, Anneke. I wondered if there is anyone within the colleagues who attended this session who wants to contribute or respond to what Anneke have said, in particular the judges who have joined us around oversight, especially regarding what Mrs. Chipo was saying from the School of Law. Maybe if they can contribute about how do we hold then judges accountable, in particular regarding oversight and stuff like that.
Hello.
Thank you.
Morning.
Victor Mahango.
Hello. Yes. My name is Victor Mhango from Malawi. I'm also a member of the Inspectorate of Prisons. I represent civil society in the Inspectorate of Prisons. But I think just to give our experience on the topic that you have actually asked us to comment on. Yeah, for us, we have a team of paralegals that works in our criminal justice system on a daily basis. So basically what happens is that when the paralegals are in prisons and then they discover that we have issues, and those issues are supposed to be addressed by the magistrates or the judges, we basically compile the list. For example, maybe the remand overstayers for the homicide. They have stayed in prison for so many years. We compile them, or maybe we have issues with scarcity of food in prisons. So we write to the registrar of the High Court to ask if they can assign a judge to come and visit prison to do maybe camp court, or just to have a general visit. But what I know for sure that even the judiciary, they've got a mandate to visit the prisons. I remember some 3 years ago, they had the roster that the judges that are supposed to go and visit the prisons. But for us, from the civil society view, we invite the judges through the registrar based on the problems that we have found in our prisons. But in terms of holding them accountable, then I think it's not our mandate. Our mandate ends there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Peter, for your contribution. And then other colleagues, is there anyone who wants to ask a question or want to contribute?
There are two judges whose hands are raised, Judge Papadakis and Judge Ntaba.
Okay, let's start from Judge Papadaka, and then from there, then we'll go to Judges Ntaba. Please go ahead. Unfortunately, some of the hands, I cannot see them.
Thank you. Yes. I need the interpretation. Ok. Muito bom dia a todos. Eu queria aqui passar uma experiência diferente de Moçambique. Em termos de supervisão, os juízes moçambicanos não têm um mandato para supervisionar as prisões. Esta é uma responsabilidade, portanto, cabe ao Ministério da Justiça, que tutela os centros correcionais, também aos procuradores e também, portanto, e ao Parlamento. E, portanto, os juízes moçambicanos intervêm apenas no período, para além da parte relativa ao julgamento e à validação, à análise da legalidade das detenções, intervêm no momento da execução de pena, mas não se deslocam aos estabelecimentos penitenciários. No caso de liberdade, concessão de liberdade condicional, que é quando se cumpre mais de metade da pena, os estabelecimentos correcionais submetem a proposta ao juiz de execução de pena e o juiz de execução de penas avalia, sob promoção também do Ministério Público, avalia portanto, se há requisitos ou não para a concessão da liberdade condicional. Isso só para dizer que esta é vai ser uma que eu acho importante, mas vai ser uma experiência nova para os juízes moçambicanos e eu penso que a lei modelo pode sim influenciar nesse sentido na mudança da legislação. Obrigada.
Thank you very much, Judge Papadaki. Can I take Judge Ntaba?
Thank you. I would have to be excused and that after I make this intervention. I wanted to highlight that I think for us in Malawi, the compelling comes from the very fact that as part of your job description, especially if you're in the criminal justice system, if you're a criminal justice judge, you are supposed to undertake what we call prison visits because it's part of the work that you're supposed to undertake. Inspectorate work is part of your job description. Fundamentally, it depends on the judge. Others do it periodically, others do it haphazardly, depending on what has come through and what their work schedule is. But the ideology is that we should all be able to undertake prison inspectorate work within the criminal justice system as a matter of course. For the rest of us other judges, we are supposed to take prison inspector work as part of work that we are supposed to do because we are still visiting justices and in terms of prisons because we're supposed to help out when there is a need. I can safely say that we've not had a situation where we've been people have held us accountable for it, but it is something that they can hold us accountable for, as I said, because it's part of the work, part of the work that you're supposed to do. For magistrates, I think it's fundamental that they undertake certain aspects, because under their job description, for instance, on remand prisoners, they're supposed to get a daily report from police about the situation in prisons and police cells for their district or for their space, the space that they're particularly in, because they're supposed to make sure that they reduce that prison population to avoid having people in prison that have spent more than 48 hours. So fundamentally, I know it's not being done, but it's something that should be done, and it's part of their job description. So we can be held accountable for it. And that's what I wanted to highlight. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Judge Ndaba, for your contribution. I see that the hand from Judge Papadaki is still raised. Do you still want to contribute, or that's a legacy hand? Thank you. It means it has a legacy hand. Thank you very much to the two judges, Judges Ndaba and Judges Papadaki, for your contribution. And then any further questions or additions in support of the model law from colleagues who have attended this session? If not, I will then take back to Anneke, probably for last remarks before we close. Anneke, do you have any last remarks?
I just want to thank everyone for joining. I know it's a Friday. I want to thank the technical working group for also helping think through things. I think what's happening is that it's quite a complex question. And the more you think about it, the more one comes up with ideas. So I would encourage even people who are at the webinar today, but who might not have said something, to join further webinars. There's one this afternoon, and then there's 4 more next week, Monday and Tuesday. And I think if you overnight get brilliant ideas on how to improve oversight, I think it's these ideas that we want to hear, because even today already I've noted down important points that is not currently in the draft model law around magistrates and around job descriptions and training where it's a practice that's not been that frequent, around the importance of paralegals sometimes being able to support that oversight, and to support judges, to remind judges to visit. So there's quite a few things that I've noted down that I think is very useful for us to include. So I just want to thank everyone. And then from here onwards, you're welcome to send comments to the SADC Parliamentary Forum email address. It's prisons@sadcpf.org. Those comments can then be taken into account, and by the end of the month there will be a draft for people to also give textual input and comments on. So there is still a process going ahead, but feel free at any time to wade in with additional comments. And then also, if you think there are particular groups that ought to be consulted through a webinar, one can raise this as well in an email. So I'll leave it at that. Thanks so much, Jacob, and everyone.
Okay. Thanks, Anneke, and then thanks everyone for joining this session. We really appreciate your contribution. And then, as Anneke said, please continue to send submissions at prisons@sadcpf.org for those who have a contribution that they want to make, or things that they think the model law in its current shape, it has omitted some of the key or critical considerations, including some of the key populations that you think that they need to be consulted as well. And then please do join other sessions if you are available, and then you've got ideas that you want to share as well as you want to contribute. The last session for today, it will start around 2 p.m. and those who are available, you are more than welcome to rejoin. Please have a lovely day further, those who we will not see after this session. And I now request Ronald to terminate the meeting. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.